All right, let's go ahead and get started with the Unit 1 review. The first question we're looking at, Carol owns Virgil's Electrical Corporation, and she needs an electrician that is placing a 9-line classified ad. The cost of an ad is X lines long, so X equals number of lines. And it says the cost of the 9-line ad is as follows in this piecewise function. So we know that it's $28 when there are 3, 2, or 1 lines, because it says here when X is less than or equal to 3. Here is when it is 4 all the way up. Well, 9 obviously is higher than 4. It's certainly higher than 3. So we know that we're going to use the second equation. And so from there, it's just a matter of plugging in whatever value we're given. In this case, X is 9, so we're going to plug 9 in and then we're going to solve. So we've got 28 plus 4 times, well, 9 minus 3 is 6. So we have 28 plus 4 times 6 is 24. Adding those two together, we get $52. All right, number 2, it says Danielle needs 550 copies of her resume printed. Dakota Printing charges $24.50 for the first 250 copies and $12.50 for every additional set of 100. So the first question says, how much will 550 copies cost? Well, I know that for the first 250 copies, the cost is going to be $24.50. So looking at that, we've now taken care of 250. So we started with 550. We've taken care of 250. So we have 300 left. And it says each additional set or additional 100 is $12.50 a piece. So I know that in 300, that equals 3 sets. So it's 3 sets times the $12.50. And when I multiply that out, I get $24.50 plus 3 times $12.50 is $37.50 for a total of $62. Now, the difference between this one and the first question is now it also says that we need to add in our tax. And we've got 9.5%. So if I move that as a decimal, I'm now looking at 0.095, but I'm also looking at the whole. So if I would like to do this in one step, I'm going to multiply this by 1.095, the 1 being the whole, or the 62, the 0.095 being the tax. And when I do that in the calculator, I get a total of $67.89. Question B says if the number of sets of 100 resumes is represented by R, express the cost of the resumes, C of S, in our function algebraically as a piecewise function. So we've got C of S is, and we know that it is $24.50 when X is, or in this case, when R is less than or equal to 2.5. And how did I get 2.5? There are 250 resumes for that $24.50. Each set is 100. Remember, we have to compare apples to apples, which means they all have to be in sets, which is 2.5. There are 2.5 sets in 250. The second line is $24.50 plus $12.50 for every set over 2.5. Remember, whatever is here is also going to be here. And it's when R is greater than 2.5. All right, number 3, it says Mr. Carter took a job through an employment agency. The job pays $62K per year. he must pay a fee to the employment agency. The fee is 38% of his first 3 weeks' pay. So 38% of his first 3 weeks' pay. How much money does Mr. Carter pay the agency? So step one is to find 1 week's pay. We're going to do that by taking the 62K. 62K equals 62,000. So we're going to take the 62,000 and we're going to divide that by 52 because there are 52 weeks in a year. When I do that, I get $1,192.31. So this is 1 week's pay. Second step, I need to find 3 weeks' pay. So now that I have 1 week, I'm just going to take that value, the $1,192.31, and I'm going to multiply it by 3. And when I do that, I get $3,576.92. So make sure that you are doing this in the calculator so that you're familiar with it. Step 3, I'm going to take that value, it's 3 weeks' pay, multiplied by 38%, or 0.38. So we're going to have the 3576.92 times 0.38, and we find the total fee that he's going to owe is $1,359.23. So make sure you're also writing the steps down. I think the steps will really help you when you are working on this when going through the test. All right, number 4, it says Chris is a tanner. He placed a classified ad for an assistant for his store. The following is the piecewise function for an X-line ad. So A says, what is the cost of a 5-line ad? Well, if I look at my qualifiers, or my when, the first one says when X, or number of lines, is 5 or less. So it's asking about 5 or less, so I know the cost is simply $35. The second question, what is the cost for 6 lines if Chris purchases 6 lines? Well, 6 is greater than 5, so I now know I need to use the second equation. So it's 25 plus 7 times 6 minus 5, which equals 25 plus 7 times 1, which is 25 plus 7. So the total cost is $32 for a 6-line ad. The third question says, how much less is a 6-line ad compared to a 5-line ad? Well, 35 minus 32, it's a $3 difference. All right, number 5, it says Mrs. Barker works 40 hours per week regularly at a rate of $36.80 per hour. When she works overtime, her rate is time and a half her regular rate. What is her overtime rate? So I had a lot of people making this more difficult than it is. All it's asking for is the rate. So we're going to take her regular rate, and she says she earns 1.5 times her regular rate for overtime. So we're going to multiply that by 1.5, and we find her overtime rate to be $55.20. And that's your answer. All right, number 6, it says Mr. Jones earns $26.50 per hour, and he works a 40-hour work week. If he receives time and a half overtime, find his total pay for the week in which he works 45 hours. So the first thing we're going to do is find his regular pay. And his regular pay is based on a 40-hour work week, and he earns $26.50 per hour. So when we do that, we end up with $1,060 for his regular pay. Next, we see that he worked 45 hours, so now we have to find his overtime pay. Well, we've already accounted for 40 hours, so 45 hours that he worked minus the 40 we've already accounted for. We're looking at 5 hours at whatever the overtime rate is. To get the overtime rate, we're going to take the regular rate, which is $26.50. And again, it says he receives time and a half. So we're going to multiply it by 1.5, and we get $39.75. So we're going to take the $39.75 and put it in there. When we multiply it together, we get $198.75. And my last step is to combine. So 1,060 plus the 198.75 gives me a total of $1,258.75 is his total pay. All right, last year Debbie's annual salary was S dollars. She was paid semi-monthly. So semi-monthly is 24. This year she received a raise of I dollars per year, and she's now paid biweekly, which is 26. So it says express her semi-monthly salary last year algebraically. So her annual salary, how much she earned for the whole year, was S, and she received 24 paychecks. So if we divide that salary by 24, that gives us her paycheck algebraically. The second question, B, says express her biweekly salary this year. So now she's getting 26 paychecks, so we know the bottom is going to be 26. Now the error I see most students make on this one is they just put I over 26, which means that you're just getting paid whatever the raise is. You're no longer getting paid the entire salary. Make sure you understand that when it says she got a raise, it was her salary plus that raise. So it's S plus I, all divided by 36. The third question, very easy. It says how many more checks does Debbie now receive now that she's paid biweekly compared to semi-monthly? Well, she did get 24 checks. Now she gets 26. So now she gets 2 more checks. All right, Mr. Franks works 36 hours for $36 per hour and works 40 hours in a regular work week. If he works 22 hours at time and a half, would his overtime pay exceed his regular pay? So we're looking at 2 scenarios, scenario 1 and scenario 2, and then we're going to compare the 2. So the first scenario, it's his rate of $36 per hour times his 40 hours per week, and we find that his total regular pay is $1,440. Now we've got to go ahead and find out what his overtime rate would be. Well, it's $36 times 1.5, which gives an overtime rate of $54. It says he worked 22 hours overtime at $54 an hour, and that totals out at $1,188. And so the question says, would his overtime exceed the regular gross pay? The answer is no. Overtime is $11.88. Regular time is $14.40. And that's sufficient to explain. If you just put yes or you just put no, then it will be marked half off. You do need to actually share the explanation here. So, would it exceed and explain? Make sure that you're doing both.